Oban captures visitors' hearts at first sight as they approach from atop the King's Highway. Nestled between mountains and the sea, Ant Oban, which means little bay in Gaelic, impressed even Queen Victoria, who called it one of the finest spots we've ever seen. Oban is the gateway to the Isles, and it's just a ferry ride away to enchanting islands such as Lismore, Mull, Iona, Collontyree and Barra. Oban is a paradise for history buffs. The area boasts ruins of many castles, and in its sparkling waters lie some of the most remarkable shipwrecks in the British Isles. World-class food, stunning scenery, fascinating history, and a wide choice of cultural and outdoor activities. It's no wonder Oban is one of Scotland's most popular holiday destinations. Join us as we make our pilgrimage to the sacred isle, Iona.
Also open. This area is now serving fresh food coffees, assorted tea.
Explore the beautiful island of Mull and Iona on this popular day tour, which will immerse you in the area's rich history and harmonious surroundings. After a short 45-minute crossing from Oban to Mull, you'll be transferred by coach for the scenic drive and guided tour across Mull, passing through Glenmore and the south shore of Loch Scriddon to reach Fian Point. From here, it's a short ferry crossing to Iona, one of Scotland's most sacred and historic sites, as well as a place of tranquility and beauty. You'll have around 2 hours to explore Iona and visit the famous abbey and nunnery, the burial place of Viking and Scottish kings over the ages, including Macbeth, before it's time for your return journey back to Oban. The first thing one notices is the monastery, built around 1200, but the spot has been sacred since 563, when St. Columba and 13 followers landed at the bay to establish a monastery. Many kings of Scotland, Ireland and the Vikings are buried at the abbey. Perhaps the most famous illustrated manuscript of the Dark Ages, the Book of Kells, was created at Iona, which was a celebrated centre of learning throughout the Middle Ages. It was at this time that the Vikings first landed on Iona, looting the abbey and slaying the helpless monks. St. Cuthbert's remains and other treasures were secreted away to Dunkeld for safety. and the surviving monks relocated to safer sites. But after the Vikings converted to Christianity in the 10th century and began marrying into the local Gaelic population, the monastery underwent a revival, and the surviving Benedictine abbey was built around 1203. Ullapool, where the mountains meet the ocean. The picturesque village of Ullapool nestles on the shores of Loch Broom and offers many attractions for those passing through or looking for a base to explore the Highlands. The name Ullapool is derived from Norse and is a reminder of the Viking heritage of the region. The village itself is a relative newcomer, commissioned by the British Fisheries Society and designed in 1788 by the engineer Thomas Telford. The grid pattern of the lower part of the village is the original design, and many of the buildings are from that time. Fishing played an important role for many years, and even today, the harbour is a local focal point for village life, where boats from all over the world can be seen landing catches from the Atlantic and local boats landing prawns and scallops at the end of the day. These days, the harbour also welcomes tall ships, cruise boats, Coast Guard vessels and numerous other vessels can be viewed as you stroll around the harbour. During the summer months, the local youth pipe band and the island dancers parade through the streets to the ferry car park and put on a show for visitors, generally on a Thursday evening in the summer. Broomfield Holiday Park is situated on the seafront at the west end of Ullapool. It extends to some 12 acres of level grass overlooking the Summer Isles, famed for its marvellous sunsets. Supermarkets, bars, restaurants, cafes, bus stop, post office and telephone are all within 5 minutes walk from the park entrance. The ferry to Lewis, the Loch Seaforth, a new vessel launched early in 2015, also sails from Ullapool. It is possible to travel as a foot passenger or take your car. And in the summer months, the ferry sails 3 times on certain days, allowing the opportunity to leave in the morning, take a tour of Lewis in the Hebrides, and return in the evening. The loch and seas around Ullapool and the Summer Isles have been designated a marine protection area. This means that fishing and other activities are controlled in certain areas, to help conserve and protect some of the features and species found in the loch and the waters, some of which are unique to this part of the world and even to the loch itself. Just outside the park entrance is the Larch public house and restaurant, and it's well worth a visit. The area north of Ullapool was designated a geopark in 2004 in recognition of the importance of the geology of the region. Heading north of the village about 13 miles, there is a visitors centre called Connag Crag, where you can find out about how the mountains and the region were formed, and the importance of the geology. The road north from Ullapool brings you into the heart of an ancient landscape, recognised internationally as the North West Highlands UNESCO Global Geopark. The area encompasses mountains, peatland, beach, forest and coastline. From the Summer Isles to the north coast beyond Durness and Loch Airball, to the thriving community of Tongue. The North West Highlands Geopark offers one of the best opportunities to explore the wild places in Europe. Whether you want to scale mountains for a spectacular view, stroll along a clean and sandy beach, or discover the hidden secrets of the landscape on a self-guided driving trail, follow the rock route through the landscape. The trail stops at specific sites of interest. The Highlands of Scotland are remote. Within it, the country which typifies this remoteness the most is Sutherland. It has the lowest population density in Western Europe, and the only one with 3 coastlines, north, east and west. Not surprisingly, the coastal landscape is stunning, with towering cliffs and golden beaches, backed by rugged mountains and barren moorland, of peat and rock, broken up by woodland straths and lochs, both large and small. It was the southern land to the Vikings, but the empty glens of today bear witness to the great clearances of the early 19th century, when people were forcibly removed from their homes to make way for sheep farming. In the most far-flung corner of this vast outback is Durness, lying 16 kilometres or 10 miles east of Cape Wrath on the north coast. It is the most northwesterly inhabited area of Britain, and home to some 320 people, a collection of scattered townships and farms. It has a diverse economy, but the mainstay is tourism, fishing, farming, sheep farming and crofting. The pace of life is slower and more traditional, and many pressures of modern-day living are not to be found here. There is an abundance of magnificent scenery and wildlife, and while the ideal holiday destination in itself, Durness makes a good point for touring the rest of northwest Sutherland, given its position on the road network. It is the corner of the road system from where you can only go south or east. The most northwesterly village on the mainland of Britain, Durness. We based ourselves at the lovely Sango Sands, so we could visit the Durness Highland Games. John Lennon enjoyed childhood holidays in Durness, relax on the golden sands, and go shopping at Blannakeele Croft Village, which includes a fabulous chocolaterie. Highland Games have a long and storied history in Scotland. They began as a way for kings and clan chiefs to select their entourage. The fastest runners were chosen to deliver messages and rally the clans, while the strongest men became personal bodyguards. The hammer throw and the shot put started as Highland sports and are now part and parcel of the international sporting circuit. But for audience experience, visitors won't want to miss true Highland Games. Dancing, piping, track and field and races are exciting to watch and hear. Participants can even join in, as many games feature foot races and other events for audience participation.
Organising and setting up this year's Highland Games. From the committee to the volunteers who set up and tidy up the grounds. At the top corner of the field, at the top of the running track, start ladies 16 years and over for the 100 yards to the top of the running track. In third place, and in fourth place, Holly Mackenzie. Third question, Holly Mackay. That's all competitors for Holy. Please make your way to the running track now.
Caithness and the north coast of Sutherland is a large area of unspoilt dramatic scenery in the far north of Scotland, indeed on the extreme edge of Europe. The borders of Caithness are the Pentland Firth to the north and the Moray Firth to the east. Caithness meets Sutherland, together covering the far north coast of Scotland. The coast is low-lying on the east and majestic on the north, with high cliffs and offshore stacks at places like Dunscombe Head, Wick and Thurso are the main settlements, based around harbours and making their living on a mix of fishing and tourism. Thurso, the most northerly town on the Scottish mainland. Thurso is a great base for exploring the surrounding countryside. There's plenty to see and do in and around the delightful town of Thurso. The town is a hive of lovely traditional shops, cafes, bars and restaurants. Don't forget to take a look at Thurso Castle, on the eastern side of the river mouth. It dates back to 1100. Not a great deal remains of medieval old Thurso, except for the roofless old St. Peter's Church. Parts of this date back to the early 1100s, and it seems to have been expanded and altered at various points over the next 7 centuries, before being abandoned in 1832, after a period of closure. Old St. Peter's Church and the surrounding churchyard are again open to the public and are well worth a visit. Journey back in time into Dornoch's troublesome past. Vikings and Picts, clans and clearances, witchcraft and suspicion, it's all here. Dornoch has a great beach, a medieval cathedral, a courthouse and old jail, a castle which is now a hotel, wonderful shops and bags of charm. Fishing has been carried out at Cullen for at least 500 years. The harbour was built in 1817 and was once busy with herring fishing. Today it is used mainly by pleasure craft. The village specialised in the export of smoked haddock and had at one time 3 large curing houses. The Moray Firth is home to one of only 2 resident populations of bottlenose dolphins in Britain. Watch carefully, and you may spot the dolphins leaping and playing. Cullen is an extremely attractive town. The town is in two parts, sandwiched between the sea wall on one side and the main road on the other. It is a fishing village, Sea Town of Cullen. This is a unique collection of a couple of hundred small stone fishermen's cottages at the seaward side. Wandering around Seatown is a slightly otherworldly experience. It was obviously a planned community. Fraserburgh lies on the north-facing coast of Buchan, just after it has rounded the corner from Aberdeen towards Inverness. In effect, it stands at the end of one side of the mouth of the Moray Firth. The town had an early start, being chartered in 1546, and was already in use as a harbour before the first stone pier was built here in 1576. There's more to St Andrews than golf courses, including the remains of St Andrews Cathedral, which was Scotland's largest cathedral, and a most magnificent church. This shows how impressive it used to be. St Rude's Tower in the precinct is part of the first church of the Augustinian canons at St Andrews, built in the early 12th century. St Andrew's Castle was built for the bishops and suffered at the hands of their enemies. Most of what you can see dates from between 1400 and 1560. Anstruther was the capital of the Scottish herring industry until the shoals deserted the Forth during the Second World War. Boats still sail out from the harbour bringing in shellfish. Anstruther is the largest in a string of pretty old-fashioned fishing villages along the stretch of the Fife Coast known as East Neuk. Perhaps the top attraction is simply tucking into a quality fish supper from the Anstruther Fish Bar, which in recent years has won a number of awards, including UK Fish and Chip Shop of the Year. Enjoy the locally caught fish by the harbour as fishing boats land their catch. The name Pittenweem can be roughly translated from Pictish and Gaelic to place of caves. It is now famous for its well-preserved merchant buildings, characterised by their white walls and red roofs, influenced by Five's trading links with Belgium and the Netherlands. Giles House was built in the first half of the 17th century for Captain James Cook, who carried Charles II to France after his defeat at the Battle of Worcester. The palace, a grand merchant's house, was built in several stages between 1597 and 1611 by Sir George Bruce, a descendant of the Scottish King Robert the Bruce. Culross Townhouse, 1626, contains the former council chamber, courtroom and prison cells. Witches were confined in the upper attics. There are 2 original painted ceilings. The Royal Borough of Culross nestles in a hollow on the Fife side of the Firth of Forth, known as Torrey Bay. It now consists mainly of 16th and 17th century architecture. Saint Cerf is believed to have founded the monastery here in the 5th century. In the 6th century, Saint Mungo, who founded Glasgow Cathedral, was born in Culross. Take a stroll up the cobbled alleyways, known as Back Causeway, which is complete with a raised central aisle that was formerly used by noblemen to separate them from the commoners. These are the remains of a religious powerhouse, whose enterprising monks mined coal, as well as praying for salvation. Saint Cerf is believed to have founded a monastery here in the 5th century. The monastery was founded in 1217 on the hill crest, but only fragments of it remain. The tower, now incorporated into the Abbey Church, is thought to have been built in the 16th century. Oh, we do love to be beside the seaside, and the folk of Fisher Row are no exception. Promenading, that much favoured Victorian pastime, remains as popular today with or without a dog. You can still buy ice creams locally. Barks and fishing boats have given way to yachts and dinghies. Water skiing began in the 90s, followed 20 years later by the Scotland-wide phenomenon of coastal rowing. This is all that's left of the historic St Andrew's Kirk. Mary, Queen of Scots, came here during some of the most turbulent times of her life. 2 days after her husband, Lord Darnley, and other lords' successful plot to murder Rizzio in 1566, she escaped to Dunbar, riding for 5 hours whilst pregnant with Darnley's son, who became James VI of Scotland. Mary rallied her supporters at Dunbar and returned triumphantly to Edinburgh a week later, when those who carried out the murder had fled to England. Mary returned to Dunbar Castle later that year. Down the hill from this end of the High Street is Dunbar's Victoria Harbour, built in the 1640s, and the final death knell for most of the remains of Dunbar Castle. The opposite corner of the harbour is occupied by the fortified artillery battery, whilst further to the southeast, again, is the Cromwell Harbour. The completion of this in 1730 led to Dunbar's dramatic growth as a fishing and, for a time, whaling port. In the 18th and 19th centuries, whilst a thriving fishing port, Eyemouth also became notorious as a centre for smuggling. As the Scottish port nearest to the continent, it became the most accessible place for the illicit import of spirits and other goods. The historic town of Eyemouth, 5 miles north of the border with England, boasts a natural harbour and fine coastal scenery. In the 19th century, the fishing industry flourished on the basis of haddock and herring fishing. But the port suffered a devastating blow on the 14th of October 1881. A storm wrecked the fishing fleet, and 189 fishermen, 129 from Eyemouth alone, were drowned, many within sight of the shore. Guns Green House was built to an Adam design in about 1753 for a successful Eyemouth merchant called John Nisbet. This must have cost a great deal of money, and it seems likely that his respectable business provided a cover-up for Nisbet's participation in the smuggling trade. The house itself is reputed to have secret passages and a fireplace which could be swung open like a gate, as well as huge cellars large enough to hold hundreds of kegs of smuggled brandy.